Hello. So the purpose of this video is to show you how to make a purchase order. We'll also cover why it might be a good idea to make a purchase order, what components make up a PO, and how to use this particular template to generate POs. So if you want just the instructions related to how to use this template, I'll make a note in the description of the video of what timestamp that content starts at. But otherwise, let's start with essentially why you might want to make a PO. The reason why you would want a purchase order is because if you generate a purchase order and transmit it to a supplier before they've either started work, if it's a service, or like started to deliver goods, what it does is give you a chance to flesh out if there are any misaligned expectations. So if if you and your supplier aren't on the same page about whether it's pricing or payment terms or any other terms or conditions, then once you transmit the PO, the supplier has a chance to reject the PO or to reach out and ask to clarify any details on it. So it's a lot better to identify things before work is started. Most significant disputes arise when one party's already started the work, so they've put some time and cost into the engagement before both parties realize that there's a problem. So then, like, if you want to just cancel it and walk away, becomes very difficult because now somebody's already started to spend money in the engagement. So anyways, having a purchase order is definitely a good practice. It could be considered a legally binding agreement depending on the circumstances. Okay, so now we're going to kind of review the components of a typical purchase order. So I'll try not to like go into a real obvious detail on anything because some of it is kind of self-explanatory, but I'll try and hit the key points. So generally speaking, this top section here would be referred to as like your PO header. And then all this stuff down at the bottom would be like your line level detail on it. So up in the header section, one of the first fields that usually appears is your purchase order number. So this particular purchase order isn't organized in a numbering format that I would recommend, but like for like a small business type of engagement, an easy way to generate a PO number is to use the date in reverse and then like an index. So as an example, if my company name is Acme Corp, I might put like ACM and then the year 2024, the month August, the date the 21st, and then 01 for the first PO of the day. And then like the next PO that I would do that day might be like this. So all the same details except I changed the index. And then if I issued a PO tomorrow, which is the 22nd, I would start over on the index and just change the date. But the reason why I suggest a PO numbering system like that is because the likeliness of generating a duplicate purchase order number is pretty low. And then also whenever you're trying to troubleshoot any type of like invoice discrepancy or receipt discrepancy, did they ship something? If the date is kind of embedded in the purchase order number, it could help troubleshoot situations like that. The other fields are like your PO date, which is self-explanatory. The account number is your customer account number with the supplier. So you may not always have a value for that, but if you do, it could be helpful to the supplier to have it there. Payment terms are kind of self-explanatory. This might be cash on delivery, net 30, net 90. Payment type is how you intend to actually issue the payment, whether that might be credit card or check or ACH transfer. The buyer's contact information here, and then PO revision number is basically the like if you issue a change order at any time after the original PO's been transmitted to the supplier, you would want to make like a change here. So it would be the same PO number, but like revision number 1, for example, or 2, 3, etc., depending on how many times you've revised it. But this allows the supplier to kind of keep track of the original order, but to know that something has changed. And then down here in the special instructions, that might be a good spot to make any notes about like what has actually changed on your purchase order, so that the supplier wouldn't have to like print off both and kind of like compare each of them to each other. So here in the header, the remaining fields are basically like this all your company information with obviously the contact info here. So a lot of times like this information, like the company name and the ship to and the bill to will all be the same. So in this template, there's a checkbox that lets you like toggle between whether or not you want to just use the same information for all 3 of these. But like in some cases, the company headquarters might be buying something, but they want it to ship to some other locations, and then they want it to bill to yet a different location. So you definitely want to provide for all of those scenarios, but in a lot of cases, especially for a small business, all 3 may be the same. Over here, we have the supplier information, which I think is kind of self-explanatory, and that's pretty much it for the header level information. So then we get down to the line level detail here. So these values are pretty self-explanatory. But I guess this taxable field here is a little bit unique. So usually items that are like tangible objects like goods, those tend to be taxable. And then things like services, like an installation um, and shipping costs, things like that are usually not taxable. So adding a little taxable yes no field here allows you to basically like calculate for each line whether or not tax should be applied. And then so like in this template, for example, it does that calculation for you based off of whatever flags you put here. So the subtotal here is usually the like pre-tax total before like surcharges and freight and tax. So here we have the tax calculated, and then if a supplier is like noted freight estimates on their proposal to you, then it might be a good idea to include it here. You don't have to. And then in the other section, that's where if there were any weird surcharges that didn't really fit into the buckets of like item or tax or freight, that's where you would basically place that information. Almost forgot to cover 3 important fields here on the PO. So currency, I think, is self-explanatory, and more than likely, I think most companies will just set it once and kind of leave it there. But shipping method, I think, is self-explanatory. It's how you want the supplier to ship the goods to you. But shipping terms, that is very important. That would influence where the liability would land if something went wrong with the shipment. So let's say package gets lost or damaged when it was shipped out. It would be this field that really influences who would be on the hook for those costs. So if you don't know like what the standard shipping term options are and how that sort of affects the liability in the situation, Wikipedia's got a good page for it. So if you Google Incoterms Wikipedia and read that page, it'll outline basically different shipping term options that are kind of universally recognized that very specifically carve out exactly who's liable for what, depending on which option you pick there. Kind of a basic explanation of it is like if you put FOB destination, that means that the person who ships it out is responsible for that shipment until it gets to the destination. So in that scenario, if something got lost or broken en route, then the shipper would actually be responsible for the costs. So another common one is you'll see is FOB origin, which means kind of like the opposite. It's like once the shipment leaves the point of origin, then the shipper is no longer responsible at that point. So I'm oversimplifying exactly how that works, and especially when you get into international shipment scenarios, all of that gets very nuanced, very detail oriented. So you definitely want to read up on it if you're going to be doing anything of high value, especially if it's going international. Okay, so we just finished up pretty much explaining the components of a PO and why you might want it. So now we're going to get into more of, I guess, the specific how to use this template. So it kind of assumes that you know what you need in order to generate a PO, and you just want to know how to use this template. So if you do have any problems in the end, I threw my email in here, so just shoot me an email. But otherwise, I guess the first thing I'll show you is when you get the template, it'll be password protected, and the password is going to be the word purchase. So if you attempt to edit anything here when it's protected, it's going to prevent you from doing so. So that's intentional so that you don't accidentally overwrite any formulas or disrupt the structure of the overall purchase order. So to unprotect it, if you do need to manually override anything, you right click on the PO output, unprotect sheet, put in the password of purchase, and it will let you do whatever you want at that point. So if you forget, there's a note right here that explains how to go through that process. Okay. So I guess the next thing you'll notice is there's a lot of these little hints here. So if you hover over any of them, it'll give you an explanation of something relevant to that field. If it's not like a super straightforward type of situation. So I guess the next unique situation is right here. So basically you got like the main buyer company information here, and then you could have a different bill to, and you could have a different ship to. So in some scenarios, and probably most scenarios, especially for small businesses, the buyer information will end up being the same as the bill to information and the ship to information. So instead of having to retype it 3 times, if you change this value to yes, you'll see that the values in here disappeared and this value changed. So basically, if we pop back over here, see that these values are all exactly the same now. So if I change this back to no, see that populated again. And then you compare company to the ship to information, you see that it's slightly different there. So that's how this field works, or these two fields work. Then here we've got freight, the tax rate, and the other charges. So basically here on the main PO, these align with these three fields here. So on the freight and other, these are going to be values that like whatever you put into this cell ends up populating through to this field. The tax works differently. So the tax is basically if you had a tax rate of, let's say, 6.25%, then you would enter it in decimal form, like 0.0625. So that's what we have here. Then what happens is the logic looks at each line that you enter you have the option of saying, yes, it's taxable, no, it's not taxable, or I'm not sure. So basically what'll happen is for every line that it has a yes, it's taxable indication, it'll apply this tax rate to that value. And then it'll combine all of the tax for each of these lines into this one subtotal here. But anything that you put as no or I don't know, it will exclude from that calculation, so it won't get brought in. So then here, the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. You just enter the relevant details for the purchase order, and it'll populate through to the purchase order template here and the output. I will show you one unique thing with Excel. There's a weird situation where if you have a super long value in a cell, in the output field, it should wrap the text, but for some reason it doesn't. So even though the settings are set properly, it's just a quirk with Excel that it doesn't recognize this. So it hasn't realized that you put in a value that's too long to fit in that cell. To trigger Excel to look at that and to get the job done, if you click on the filter, uncheck blanks, and then recheck blanks, it'll cause it to actually wrap the text properly. So if I come back and remove this, the same problem happens in reverse, where, okay, now that cell's empty, but Excel doesn't realize that it can shrink that row height back down. If you do the same thing, it'll fix the formatting. So I know that's a little weird. It's just a quirk with Excel, but I put some screenshots here that kind of explains how that works. But here, let me show you what the output will ultimately look like. So essentially, when you go to generate the purchase order, you actually want to do File, Print to PDF, as opposed to saving it. You can save it, and you probably should save it as an Excel version too. But to get this nice clean copy, you want to do File, Print to PDF. And this is what it'll ultimately look like, which is a pretty professional looking comprehensive purchase order template. So anyways, that is that. And I guess if you have any questions, just leave a comment or shoot me an email. Thank you. Bye-bye.